Hi, and welcome back to the show. Today, I am joined by Chris Mackintosh of Logix BPO. He is the Chief Operating Officer. Chris himself has about 35 years outsourcing experience crossing the globe. So it's an interesting conversation with Chris to get his perspective and, of course, his insights and updates on Logix BPO, which, after only about 4 to 5 years, has grown to about 2,000 staff, which of course is super impressive work. So it's a interesting conversation with Chris. As always, if you want any of the show notes, go to outsourceaccelerator.com/podcast. Enjoy. Have you heard of Hiring Branch? Hiring Branch is changing the way contact centers hire, helping hiring managers know who can do the job before giving them the job. Creators of the first open-ended AI assessment, Hiring Branch measures language and soft skills, like critical thinking or empathy, in job simulations, making it easy and accurate for recruiters to shortlist candidates, streamline all assessments into one, and improve agent output. This innovative assessment is already being used by over 1,000 recruiters in reputable companies like Bell and other Fortune 500s. Prove better results yourself with their risk-free pilot. Learn more at hiringbranch.com/pilot. That's hiringbranch.com/pilot. Chris, welcome to the show. How are you doing?
I'm good, thank you, Derek.
Chris, you're truly an industry veteran. We were just chatting before the show, over 35 years in the industry, which is amazing and genuinely, worldwide experience. So thank you for joining us. You recently made a move to Logix BPO. So first of all, why don't you just sort of briefly introduce Logix, and then we can hear about your journey.
Yeah, no, I will do. Thank you very much. Right, so just introducing Logix BPO. Logix BPO started just under 5 years ago now by the founder, a British guy called Anthony Godley. And he set it up with, very strong morals, based out of the Philippines. So, currently we are 3 sites in the Philippines. The majority of our business is out of Cebu. We do have other sites in Iloilo and Bohol, a small site. We use these secondary sites more for development work, more for our kind of CS and CX kind of work. But as I say, the majority of our stuff comes out of Cebu. We do have a couple of other geos within our organization. We run 2 sites out of India, one in Kolkata and another up near the Nepal border, which is in Darjeeling, called Siliguri. And then we have 2 further sites in Africa, one in Kenya and one in Durban, South Africa. So all in all, we're around just over 2,000 seats. The majority of that, I would say around 1,400, close on 1,500, is based here in the Philippines.
Wow, that's amazing. And quite a geographical spread, yeah? What was the sort of thought behind so many different locations?
Yeah, I think it was a case of, you mentioned right at the beginning, I've been in the industry 35 years. I started 35 years ago out of India, and we needed something a little bit more many, many years ago. And that kind of progressed to South Africa and again, Durban. And then it was about 20 years ago, I ventured here to the Philippines. I think it was at the time when compliance started to change. There was a few people flexing muscles in the UK in terms of, compliance and culture. And India very much became under the spotlight. And what actually happened was, by coming to the Philippines, we noticed the voice quality was superb, mainly, with a direct correlation with the American markets, but also we thought it would be superb for, markets like Australia as well. So But that being said, I've had customers that are with me now at Logix that have followed me around the world too. And therefore they do like to have all their eggs not in one basket. And therefore there is a massive, and when I say that, I'm talking country wide or geo wide, not necessarily site wide. And I guess that, with many of our kind of airline companies and our telco CS companies, they do want something a little bit more than just the Philippines, only from a, like a BC, like a business continuity planning type of venue. So we have small Cs covering, multi clients. So that's kind of the reason why we have all this kind of geographical, and I think it's kind of the main thing now in BPO that, BPO companies do have multi geos as part of their remit and their offering.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? Is it really just to sort of kind of appease the check boxing of the clients in terms of multiple geos? Do you see significant advantage, disadvantages, contrast between the different geos?
Yeah, I mean, I would say yes, it is a tick box exercise. The main advantage is in non-voice because of cost. As you can imagine, your cost in various parts of Africa, like Kenya and then in India, like the two sites that we have in India, your cost per hour is a lot less than it is. I mean, South Africa actually is on a higher cost value than the Philippines, believe it or not. So
True.
I think it's more a tick box and very good for kind of more non-voice process. But if it's for voice process, it is a cost-saving mechanism in there as well.
Right. And, a lot has been said about the cultural nuances of each of the Philippines and, really having to understand the Filipino culture and communication to really get the best out of them. How does that translate when you are literally covering multiple countries and geos? How do you become an expert in all of those cultures so that you get the best out of the teams?
I think over 35 years, you learn something. And, initially it was India, and that was easy because India's kind of relationship with the UK, with Brits, was very, very strong. So, you go into India and the people are just very, very grateful that you're bringing business into India. So you've got that kind of nice environment where they respect you because you're bringing them work. And therefore you're able to manage these people because they want to be the best. They want to learn. They want to fight against other countries, to keep the business because they're more than likely in danger of losing it. Then when you look at Africa's probably the hardest one to kind of, to really alert to because there's so many cultures and so many different kinds of, cultures happening in Africa. In Durban alone, you pretty much got a very high Indian influence in his culture. So therefore, in terms of kind of managing in the early days, close on kind of 30 years ago, it was very easy. Obviously the politics has changed so much in South Africa in 30 years, as the world would know and the world would see. But 30 years ago, it was a good place to go and be able to manage people and to service. Primarily, it was the UK market that we were servicing, and it was done purely because, time difference. I mean, the time difference was an hour. So everybody alluded to the fact that South Africa would be a good fit because it's working more or less in times of UK hours.
It's obvious, isn't it?
But, yeah. So there was a good alignment, and plus a lot of Brits had kind of transitioned over to South Africa, mainly Scottish, which was another good thing, because my roots are Scottish with a name like Mackintosh. So I was kind of well received, everyone, kind of, respected what I was trying to do. However, the game plan really changed 20 years ago when I came to the Philippines, and it was a case of, again, coming to the Philippines, the first 5 years was very tough, because they're a very enthusiastic race. They're a very, you can really work well with them. They're very good at rapport building. Then they were very shy in looking at things like sales or anything to do with outbound kind of calling. They're very shy in the early days, but it's over the last 20 years, it's changed so much. And now they're very open. They're very, open to anything, and they're better. Training a Filipino to do anything from sales or outbound calling, they've got no fear.
I mean, they're still sort of, using generalizations, of course, they're still somewhat more introverted, aren't they, than some of the more extroverted kind of cultures, whether that's LATAM or, maybe parts of that. But yeah, certainly I see there's a lot more general capability here and adaptability, and a lot more sort of depth in the different roles, whereas previously it was just kind of quite shallow, wasn't it, in terms of the capabilities and the I suppose, agility, different functions. That's really interesting. And 2,000 staff in 5 years, that's tremendous growth, nothing short of tremendous growth. What were the secrets behind that?
Well, partly is companies that actually follow me. I've had a lot of clients that have stayed with me purely because of what they see is what they get. They get somebody who is prepared to work long hours and make sure that, we achieve their KPIs and what they want to achieve, to bring out the best results.
But you've only been in the company 10 months, have you? Right?
Yeah. But what happened
is the growth from the last 10 months? I mean, that's even more incredible.
Yes, mainly because, it was built on because the previous company was actually acquired, and that the company that acquired them just purely wanted an African footprint. So they weren't interested in the Filipino aspects. So for about 18 months, my role in my previous company was looking at transitioning. And yes, I was offered a role to go there, to go to Africa and basically, be the managing director of one of its key sites. But it would have been more somewhere like Ethiopia or Rwanda, which wasn't, particularly appealing for me, bearing in mind that, 20 years I've been here in the Philippines. Plus, I should say that I married a Filipino 15 years ago and we're still together. So, we kind of looked, when the company was in the process of being acquired, we kind of looked and said, would that be something that we'd like to do? Transition the family to Africa. And she wasn't having any of it. So, so unfortunately I wasn't having any of it either. So, so that's kind of what happened there. And also the majority of the seats that we had only, again, they had this kind of policy of they didn't want to transfer or transition everything over to Africa. And that's kind of it. We did it on a initial 3 to 6 month contract for some of our clients. Plus they wanted to stay here in the Philippines. And I was able to kind of transition a lot of that business here to Logix, which is great. because number one, it's nice for me because I know the clients well. I work with the clients well. So not a lot has changed from their perspective. Yes, they still run in parts of Africa, but from what I know, they're not happy. It's not what they were sold. And believe me, it wasn't me that sold them it. It was me that just had to, do the transitioning point of view. Right. So I never sold them the dream of it. And when clients work with me, they know exactly what they can expect, wherever they go, whichever part of the world they're going to go. Okay. I can tell them. Yeah.
And so you're heavy into sort of more traditional call center CX. Is that right? Is that sort of the lion's share of your service provision? And is it fully managed solutions?
It is. Again, slight change in Anthony's business. Anthony started life as an RPO, and now we're fully a BPO. Managed, people solutions, just purely and simply because, again, my involvement in the company, I'm very much an operational, person, someone who's considered, well renowned in the industry, and therefore, it kind of makes sense that, we go down the route of this and we go down the route of what I've traditionally done. Yes, we do still have a few clients that still want the RPO but they're actually starting to migrate now, and, more and more into BPO from RPO purely because they get the benefit of as you say, of having the managed, services side. But I was going to say to you that, why we're sort of CX and CS now is purely, again, a change in contrast, because 30 odd years ago, I was very much a focused person on outbound, and doing more things like sales and telemarketing and, and appointment generation. But that kind of switched again, probably 25 years ago, where I then started getting involved with inbound customer support. And then it just grew from there. It just so happened that what I do is I can offer the whole 360. So we can do the inbound customer support, kind of multi-channel. We can then also do more work for the kind of clients that work in, say, the telco area, in the kind of, demand TV area, all these areas that require kind of upgrading sales, new business, as also part of their growth. So we can do it, and I can do it. And that's kind of how, I become kind of like specialized in kind of the industry.
And, there's a big concern that traditional CX and call center functions are now under threat through the march of AI and, automation and the bots. What is your sort of view on that, and how are you adapting your strategy, and, what's the long-term perspective on that?
Well, I'm not somebody who's going to my clients and saying, hey, why don't you look at this? When are you going to look at this? I'm a kind of believer in saying, listen to our clients. At the moment, we have solutions for them. And if it isn't broke, let's not try to fix it. However, in some of the industries, like for example, the demanding kind of airline industry, you do come across problems when you're doing, say, back office processes, where, there is a lot of manual errors, right? Because of the time pressure, because of the different ways that countries kind of code, for example, dates. Like here in the Philippines, we do month, day, year. and we only use a 2-digit year. Some countries use day, month, year, and they use a 4-digit.
Yeah, the technology can work around that now, sure.
So that's kind of where it's a necessity for us, because I call it the spell checker, the glorified spell checkers. And I think that's where, BPO companies need to really invest, because obviously as much as getting money in from managed services, they're losing money out the door in terms of financial errors on silly little things like this. So, but getting back to your question, I'm not out there at the moment saying, hey, we should look at this. And I'm always getting approached by companies to look at technology. There's technology now in terms of accent control. And
but surely if you're talking to, if you have airlines as your clients, yep, they're not relying on you to be the scout with the latest technology. In the boardrooms, they are demanding their AI strategy, and so they would be pushing that responsibility onto you, or putting downward pressure on the numbers that you can hire to get a certain CSAT or response time. So, what are you seeing? I don't expect you to be putting it on to the clients. I see a lot of demand from the client side, at least for answers. And then what are you seeing in the market? Is it putting downward pressure on your staffing numbers?
It is. It's beginning to now. I've noticed the last kind of 4 or 5 years, it hadn't. But this year I've seen a degree of change. Exactly how you've just described it, Derek. These organizations now are starting to move forward with their own tools and technology. And that's all on test. It's all on test at the moment. So what they haven't done is they haven't said, right, let's reduce your people here and now, but they have indicated that they will be reducing our people. Now, that being said, I do have another client in a different arena. This client is in the property rental and the leasing, as they call it, leasing and maintenance arena. Now, they had saved the kind of level of headcount that they've had with me, but what they were doing is their new hire training. So when you get a slight bit of attrition and you want to do backfill, they kind of stop the backfill.
Right. But how is that playing out though? Like you mentioned that a client is sort of saying reduce staffing. Are they saying that because their ticket volume is reducing because they are putting in applications to cater to those? Or are they saying, look, Chris, you need to come up with the technological solutions. We only want to staff at 70% of the number and have AI deal with the first 30% of the tier one. What is that conversation, deep?
No,
how does it work?
It hasn't been the second way. What it's been is the first way has been a case of they have lost their clients because their clients have moved towards taking technology in terms of AI. So what they've done is they've been developing their own series of AI so they can then go back and re-attract these clients, plus attract further clients. And what they've told me is that what that will involve is that we will have a kind of second level of operators. So what I was trying to do was looking at how the market was changing, Derek, was looking at your kind of base level of agents where AI and chatbots are coming in and they're kind of taking more of that work up to a point where you get to escalation. So what I've been doing is I've been growing and developing our people into a more help desk environment so that it can soon become aligned to this AI technology or chatbot technology that's going to be used. So that, for example, where in most cases, the agent would come in and kind of not be readily prepared, to understand at what level the chatbot was with the client, or the AI voice model was with the client, because they're asking just basic, the same basic questions and offering the same range of answers.
And so is the innovation expected on your side, or is that the client does that and you just provide the staffing for the remainder? How are you seeing that?
It started off as the first idea, right? But now it's developing, because they're allowing me to come in and work with them more on a consultative kind of basis, so that I can start to look at helping them push forward with their own AI or bot or RPA, technology. So, but at the end of the day, it's still their technology. It's still their technical people's decision on what they want to use. But they're now kind of involving me just purely out of kind of long-term working relationships, in terms of coming in and, helping them, put it together, rather than saying to us, right, guys, you've got to go out because if we were to go out and look at our own technology, we could not say, for example, we've got multiple clients within the CS field. They all have different, processes. They all have different, technology strategies. So, it would be absolutely ludicrous for us to go out and go, actually, let's get our own and try to sell it to them when they're already kind of down their route of what they think they want.
Sure. And, if you do the consulting, like how it's cannibalizing your interests, it's kind of the innovator's dilemma, isn't it? Isn't it ultimately in conflict with your business? You've just added 2,000 seats in an extraordinary short amount of time. Is that going to be 1,500 next year if this all goes to plan? Not necessarily your plan, but someone's plan.
Yeah, possibly. That's the danger not only I've got, but every BPO has got. For example, one of the clients.
How are you monetizing it then? So, you're consulting to basically make your business smaller, or?
Well, yeah. And then what we're doing is we're looking at price of agents, so that the agent would be X dollar an hour on base level. But if you're doing away with base level, but you're kind of maintaining what I would call the T3 level, and you still require T2 level, that's where you're going to make your money back. I mean, luckily obviously the clients are there to try and save money and do cost savings. But, they do understand that they still need a partner and they still need a reliable service. So I know I will lose headcount. I won't lose as much money as the headcount of loss would suggest. And at the moment, we're not even talking about numbers. We're not even looking at numbers of people. We're just talking about conceptually what we're trying to achieve. Plus, my strategy is also looking at other processes outside of customer services that I can also add numbers of heads, to my business. And so that's the constant fight that I have kind of daily in trying to, plow through and increase the account base in other processes, and how to develop that. And it could be in sort of, fields like, the digital marketing arena. It could be for like web developers. It could be for accountancy. It could be for bookkeeping. So that's kind of where the new kind of growth path is. But at the same time, I'm not losing sight on my customer service, customer experience, where we're growing our people from base level to, to higher level, 3. And these are the conversations and these are the kind of supports, knowing full well that we will lose a degree of headcount, but we won't lose so much in terms of, overall revenue, because we will be able to, charge us a higher margin, a higher price, for these secondary and third levels of people.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is, not necessarily talking for Logics, but the industry more generally. Yeah. CX is a very headcount heavy process, and larger companies can have whatever, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of CX and those sort of roles. And that's why, these call centers flock to those sort of activities. Whereas how many, web developers or social media managers do these people really need? It's kind of, that slips down into the sort of SME kind of businesses and as staff augmentation. And typically you have smaller teams of 5 or 10, not 200 or 2,000. Yeah. So how is it able to support the large volumes?
No, not necessarily. No, you're right. Again, very, very, very perceptive. But going back to the CS, at the moment, you said large headcounts. There's a lot of bufferage in those large headcounts at the moment. So by the time technology comes in, you won't necessarily need the bufferage, because obviously the bufferage is there to affect the initial line adherence. So when you're moving into sort of secondary level, third level, you may not necessarily have that degree of wastage. But to answer your question about, numbers of seats, again, there's still growth room and still growth potential in some of these CX clients that do want to work on their own sales aspects, which again won't necessarily go through, AI or any kind of bot. But again, there are certain clients that are looking at kind of having that kind of pitch at the moment, which is interesting, but I think it's a bit of a disaster, because I think people get more success from speaking to somebody and having their questions answered, uniquely, not kind of randomly as per the, the current level of bot stroke, AI, So I think there's a degree of growth there, because they're realizing, they're kind of realizing that they also need to grow, and they also need to, gain market, So, but again, doing the numbers, they, you're right, they don't stack up. They don't kind of stack up if, versus on this side, if you lost, 20, 30% of your workforce, are you going to get it? You will get it back, but you have to get it back in more clients, and more, more pieces of business.
Sure. That makes sense. Very interesting. And, where do you see the next 5 years then? Is it sort of business as usual, or do you think there will be a sort of dramatic change?
I think we're more likely to kind of see minimal change in the next 18 months, 2 years. In 5 years, I really think the industry is going to be, massively overrun with AI. I think, there are some good things out there in the market, but they're not right. They're not 100%. They're not even 50%. They're just doing parts and parts. So you still need, and you still need people. You still need human power, to come back in. But I do think in 5 years, I think a lot of this stuff that's being tested, will develop, will get better. And I do believe that in 5 years, it will be it will be a very high percentage majority of AI, RPA, and ML running this industry, and with very, very few kind of human voice levels, kind of behind it, or certainly not the same, maybe controlling it, from that perspective. But I do think the next 2 years is kind of crucial. I don't see them being, plans for the bigger clients that have the bigger numbers to say, hey, we're gonna wipe you out overnight. I think that's going to take a period of time. And I think that period of time is 18 months to 2 years.
Got it. Yeah. Watch your space. Well, Chris, fascinating conversation, and it's really kind of all happening in the corner of outsourcing, isn't it? So congratulations on, your incredible growth, and big success for the future. As always, I encourage people to reach out. How can they find out more?
Yeah, sure. I mean, please visit logicsbpo.com from the website. My email address is Chris, and that's with a CH, and it's .m for Mackintosh. So chris.m@logicsbpo.com. Feel free to reach out to me.
Chris, that's amazing. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thanks, Derek.
That was Chris Mackintosh. He is the Chief Operating Officer of Logix BPO. As always, if you're on any of the show notes, go to outsourceaccelerator.com/podcasts. And if you want to ask us anything, drop us an email to ask@outsourceaccelerator. See you next time.